Hey everybody, as I'm sure most of you know, Islam Makhachev is unfortunately out of the bout this weekend against Rafael dos Anjos. They're the headliners for the main card. And fortunately for us, Paul Felder decided to step in and take the fight. He was originally supposed to be the color commentator for the card, and now he's going to be fighting. So you got to think like, man, what a mentality shift, right? There was a lot of talk about Michael Chandler maybe getting the fight, and he said he had different plans. And when you hear that news come out, you're like, man, who's going to want to fight Rafael dos Anjos on short notice? Because it's a risky fight. He's a veteran. He's got good striking, good jiu-jitsu, and he's not an easy fight for anybody at 155 pounds, right? So you got to think that for most of the guys who are ranked even in the top 10, this is not a guy that you want to be fighting on 5 days' notice. But Paul Felder is a goddamn badass, man. And you got to think about this guy's mentality throughout his career, right? Think about what happened at UFC 223. Khabib was originally slated to fight Tony Ferguson for the lightweight title. Tony gets hurt. And Max Holloway steps in. There's all this chaos, right? And then Max Holloway can't cut the weight. There's all kinds of issues with that. So they look for a replacement, and Paul Felder's jumping all over it. He's like, I want the fight. I want the fight. However, he didn't have a ranking next to his name, and Ali Quinta does. Ali Quinta was supposed to be Paul Felder's opponent on that card, and Ali Quinta ended up getting the fight. But the point is that Felder wanted it. He wanted Khabib, right? And then you think, when he fought Mike Perry, right? He moved up to 170 pounds. And I think he took that fight on like 6 or 7 days' notice. And now, when one of the more promising prospects in the UFC's 155-pound division goes down, the man who was originally supposed to call that fight steps in to save the card. And, I mean, to me, it just speaks volumes to his mentality. And I know that he's coming off that loss against Dan Hooker, right? But it was a close fight. A lot of media outlets scored it for Paul Felder, felt that he should have came out on the winning end of that one. And afterwards, he said that he was going to retire, and he hasn't fought since. But then he kind of went backtracked, changed his mind, and said, well, I only want to take fights that entice me. And I'll tell you what, man, a fight against Rafael dos Anjos, who's an absolute legend in the sport, is enticing. And as an MMA fan, just because I'm looking forward to this card, this is a good card. I'm just extremely happy that he took the fight. And, yeah, the Irish Dragon stepping up to make sure that we have an entertaining weekend coming up on Saturday. So shout out to Paul Felder. I just wanted to talk about what a fucking badass he is and how that mentality is not something that you see amongst all fighters, right? And don't get me wrong, like if you're in a position like Dan Hooker or somebody like that, I'm not saying that the right move is to take RDA on short notice, but it kind of seems like all the pieces fell in place for Felder to do this. And it excites me because when Paul Felder fights, you're going to get a fight. Like when him and RDA go in there to scrap, you're going to get a fucking scrap. It's going to be a fun fight. Paul Felder likes to stand and bang. He's got great kickboxing, right? And it's one of the more entertaining fights that you could have put together given the circumstances. And again, just got to reemphasize what a badass move for Paul Felder too. Again, you got to think about, it's a giant shift in mentality. You're talking about commentating on people fighting versus being in there and actually doing it. So, man, I'm just super excited that the card and the main event is still on and on track. So, yeah, just wanted to give a shout out to Paul Felder, the Irish Dragon, Philadelphia, baby.